Hello, and welcome to Module 21, Structured Literacy for Paraprofessionals. Here are a few quick reminders. Follow along on your anticipation guide and be sure to complete the questions within each section before moving on to the next video. There is a question box at the end of the module, so jot down any questions you have as you go through the module. Module 21 has been divided into two main parts. Part 1 is an overview of structured literacy, and Part 2 will discuss literacy practices most relevant to paraprofessionals. We will now begin Section 1, an overview of structured literacy. In this section, we will answer the following questions. What is structured literacy, and why is it important? Let's begin this section by thinking about literacy in the United States. Follow along on your anticipation guide or jot down your answers on a separate sheet of paper. First, what percentage of adults in the U.S. read below a sixth grade level? Do you think it is 18%, 24%, 42%, or 54%? Pause for a moment to write down your answer. The correct answer is 54%. That means that over half of the adults in the U.S. read below a sixth grade level. Think about what this means for our workforce, our economy, our society. Here's another question. What percentage of juveniles who become involved with the juvenile court system are considered functionally illiterate or unable to read? Is it 35%, 75%, 85%, or 91%? Take a minute to write down your answer. The answer is 85%. Think for a minute about the correlation that this statistic suggests. If 85% of juveniles in the court system are unable to read, could these juveniles be more likely to commit crime because of their low reading abilities? Here's one more question to consider. What percentage of inmates in America's prisons cannot read above a fourth grade level? 28%, 57%, 65%, or 70%? Take a minute to jot down your answer. The correct answer is 70%. In our country, students who do not read well are more likely to go to jail than they are to become gainfully employed. Although those statistics are dismal, they help to build the case that literacy is very important. Here are some things that adults need strong literacy skills to be successful at. Literacy skills are essential to be a good employee. Factory workers have to read safety regulations and warnings so they and their coworkers can stay safe at their jobs. Office workers often work in teams and must be able to read emails and communicate clearly. Farmers, doctors, computer programmers, and waitresses require different skill sets, but all use literacy skills. Strong literacy skills also help adults avoid crime. As our earlier questions demonstrated, there is a clear correlation between illiteracy and crime. Without the proper skills to become employed, many adults turn to criminal activity to meet their basic needs, such as stealing, and end up in prison. Literate adults are active in their communities. They are more likely to volunteer to help charitable organizations, to sit on local boards and communities, and to help with community projects. Literate adults are also informed voters. They read newspapers and online articles about social issues and vote for candidates accordingly. Literate adults become advocates because they have access to important information, like how to keep themselves and their families healthy. They have access to health care that allows them to get preventative care as well as help during an illness. They understand a doctor's orders, can calculate how much medication is needed, and can access other types of wellness programs. Finally, adults with strong literacy skills raise children who have strong literacy skills. When adults know how to read, they begin reading to their babies long before they enter the school system. Literate adults talk to their children with higher vocabulary and encourage language skills in young children, which are precursors to reading skills. Literate parents also encourage their children to read. They are more likely to buy books for their homes and take their children to local libraries. These parents are also more likely to enroll their children in preschool programs to prepare them for elementary school, and they take an active role in their child's education. Our state also recognizes the importance of literacy and sought to enhance the way reading instruction is delivered in our public schools. In 2022, Pennsylvania House Bill 1642 prompted the amendment to Chapter 49 of Pennsylvania School Code to mandate standards for education training in structured literacy. This resulted in two major changes. First, colleges must now provide structured literacy instruction in teacher preparation programs. Second, the Department of Education developed resources for professional development for current teachers and administrators. Schools are now required to provide training to current teachers and administrators in public schools. The teachers you work with have likely participated in a structured literacy training. So now that we understand how important literacy is and that Pennsylvania has mandated structured literacy trainings, let's talk about what structured literacy actually is. Structured literacy is an approach. That means it is not a canned program or something that is prepared for teachers to deliver, but rather it is a way for teachers to teach. It means teachers are explicit, systematic, and sequential when they teach literacy skills. Let's break down those three words a little more. Explicit means clearly, without confusion. So this means that teachers are going to teach these skills using clear and precise language, leaving no room for error. Systematic means done according to plan. This means that schools are going to plan out how and when they will teach specific skills. This means there is a schedule or a scope and sequence for when skills will be introduced and when it is expected that students will have mastered these skills. Finally, sequential means being arranged in a certain sequence or order. That means that the literacy skills are going to be taught in that certain order. These skills will build upon each other and make sense. Structured literacy also allows for cumulative practice and ongoing review. That means that once a skill is taught, teachers review it often, even after students master it, so they will retain the information. There is also a lot of opportunity for practice. This means more time spent on practicing skills like spelling, reading, and writing. Structured literacy also focuses on a high level of engagement with lots of student-teacher interactions. This means that we're moving away from the type of teaching where a teacher stands in front of the entire class and spends a long amount of time just talking while the children sit in desks. In structured literacy, students are actively engaged in their learning. Often, there are students working in small groups, while teachers work with other groups or individual students. There are lots of manipulatives, things like word cards or magnets or letter tiles the students can physically touch and use to reinforce literacy skills. Teachers also are careful about the examples they use when they teach new skills, and they use corrective feedback so that students do not learn things incorrectly from the beginning. The Ladder of Reading, shown here, was developed by Nancy Young and illustrates the necessity for structured literacy approaches in our schools. This graphic shows 4 broad categories of students in our current schools. As you can see at the top, a very small percentage of our students, about 5%, learn to read effortlessly. These are the students that will learn to read regardless of the type of literacy instruction they receive. For perspective, in a kindergarten class of 25, 5% is 1 student. The next rung on the ladder shows a larger percentage of the student population who learn to read with relative ease as long as they receive some type of broad instruction. As you can see on the right-hand side of the graphic, Both of these populations of students are benefited by the structured literacy approach. And research shows that they will master the concepts more quickly with explicit and systematic instruction, like structured literacy. The ladder of reading also showcases the overwhelming body of research that has proven structured literacy approaches do not harm any population of students. Now let's look down here at the bottom of our ladder where the biggest population of students lands. It's up to 50% of our population. Back to our kindergarten class of 25, that's about 12 to 13 students, and they require code-based, explicit, systematic, and sequential instruction in order to become proficient readers. Those are the same words we just talked about in structured literacy. Research has proven that these students will not learn to read proficiently without that structured literacy approach. Finally, down at the bottom is our 10 to 15% of students with reading disabilities, such as dyslexia. These kiddos simply will not learn to read without an intensive structured literacy approach that offers that explicit, systematic, and sequential instruction, layered with other things like diagnostic and repetitive practices. For this 50 to 65% of the student population, structured literacy isn't just an advantage, it is a necessity. The ladder of reading really represents the profiles of the students coming into our school systems today. It also demonstrates why the state has placed such an importance on structured literacy and has required this training for so many teachers throughout the state. This graphic summarizes the concept of structured literacy. Structured literacy is really about taking the specific elements of literacy and coupling them with effective teaching principles to create a high quality and high impact reading instructional approach. It is taking what research has shown are the essential elements of literacy and adding them to what research has shown are the most effective teaching strategies. In the next section, we will look more at those specific elements of literacy and discuss how paraprofessionals can support students and teachers in the classroom. This slide gives some context to why structured literacy is relevant to teachers and paraprofessionals at all grade levels. First, it is important to point out that research has consistently shown that the earlier reading problems are addressed, the more quickly gaps in learning close. That means we should be using assessments that can help determine which students have learning gaps, and our most intensive supports and efforts should be focused in the K-2 grade levels to address these skill deficits as early as possible. Research has also found that students who do not learn to read by the end of third grade are 3 times more likely to drop out of high school than their peers. This means that educators know which students are most at risk for dropout long before they reach high school. Efforts in upper elementary and middle school grades should be focused on remediating the skill deficits for this population of students to ensure the students are receiving the support they need to reach reading proficiency and stay in school. Finally, it is important to note that some reading problems don't emerge until the later grades, typically after third grade. This is when an instructional shift occurs from teaching students how to read to having students read in order to learn. Students are expected to read their textbooks or grade level materials and gain knowledge from the passages they read. And this is when comprehension issues, as well as underlying phonics issues, become evident. For teachers in the upper grades, it is important to be equipped to not only identify these reading issues, but have the knowledge and skills to address the skill deficits. According to the National Institute of Literacy, only 5% of Americans with strong literacy skills live in poverty. We know that literacy is the key that unlocks many doors for students after graduation, including post-secondary education and good careers. When students drop out of high school or graduate without strong literacy skills, they face a bleak future, which unfortunately often includes poverty and prison. All of this research builds the case for a structured literacy approach. This ends the first section. Please complete the questions before moving on to section 2.